There is a kind of love you become almost incapable of accepting once you stop needing another person to prove that you are enough. And if you've spent years believing love was something you had to earn, this shift can feel almost unsettling. Because for a long time, maybe love meant waiting. Waiting for the message. Waiting for him to become clearer. Waiting for someone emotionally unavailable to finally choose you completely. Waiting for the relationship to become what you kept seeing in its potential. And every time he moved closer, you felt relief. Every time he pulled away, something inside you collapsed. You called it love. But sometimes what you were feeling wasn't only love. It was the fear of what his absence seemed to say about you. Maybe, I'm not enough. I'm too much. I'm difficult to love. I'm getting older. What if this was my last chance? What if nobody chooses me again? And those fears can become especially powerful later in life. Because at 45, 52, 60, you aren't entering relationships as a blank page. You arrive with history, maybe a marriage, a divorce, children, a betrayal you survived but never completely forgot, a relationship you stayed in much longer than you should have, or 20 years of being the woman who kept everyone else emotionally alive while quietly wondering when somebody would finally choose you with the same certainty. So when love appears, you're not only meeting another person. Sometimes you're meeting every old wound that person accidentally touches. And that's why this conversation matters. Because there is a profound difference between saying, I want this man in my life, and I need this man in my life so I can feel safe, valuable, wanted, or complete. Those two sentences can look identical from the outside. They do not create the same relationship. When you need love to rescue your sense of worth, you become more willing to negotiate against yourself to keep it. You overlook inconsistency. Explain away emotional distance. Accept crumbs because crumbs feel safer than an empty table. You become obsessed with whether he chooses you, and forget that you are also supposed to be choosing. But something changes when the need begins to loosen. You don't stop wanting love. Please understand that. You don't become cold, detached, cynical. You don't convince yourself, I don't need anybody. That's not healing. That's another form of armor. What changes is that love stops carrying the impossible job of completing a self you have abandoned. And from that place, you begin noticing different men, different behavior, different qualities, different warning signs. You become less impressed by intensity and more interested in consistency, less seduced by uncertainty, less willing to call anxiety chemistry, less fascinated by someone you have to continuously convince to stay. And sometimes the most surprising change is this: the kind of relationship that once felt boring begins feeling peaceful. The kind of man you once overlooked because he didn't create emotional chaos begins feeling safe. You stop confusing being activated with being loved. That's where Jung becomes useful. His idea of individuation was not about becoming isolated from other people. It was about becoming increasingly whole. More conscious of the parts of yourself you've projected outward. More able to recognize your shadow. More capable of living from an inner center instead of organizing your identity entirely around approval, roles, and expectations. And relationships expose this work faster than almost anything else. because nothing reveals what you secretly believe about yourself, quite like who you become afraid to lose. So today, we're going to talk about the love that becomes possible when you stop needing someone else to complete the story of your life. We'll look at why emotional need can make you tolerate relationships that keep reopening the same wound. Why desperation changes the way you behave without you even noticing. Why attachment can keep you loyal to pain simply because pain is familiar. What individuation actually changes inside your relationships. And finally, what healthy love starts to look like when you're no longer asking, "Will he choose me?" before asking, "Do I feel safe, respected, and more like myself when I am with him?" Because when that question changes, your entire love life can change with it. Before we continue, I have one quick favor to ask. Please like this video so YouTube knows this content is valuable and can show it to more people. And subscribe so we don't disappear from your feed. Thank you for being here. Now let's keep going. And the first change happens somewhere most people never think to look. Not in the person you're dating. Inside the meaning you have attached to being chosen. Because sometimes you don't only want his love. You want what his love would seem to prove. That you're still desirable. That you weren't too old to start again. That your divorce didn't mean you failed. That being left didn't mean you were unlovable. That the years you gave someone were not wasted. That you still have it. That somebody sees you. And there is nothing shameful about wanting to feel seen. Every human being wants that. But when being chosen becomes evidence that you're worthy, rejection becomes much more than rejection. It becomes a verdict. He doesn't call? Your mind doesn't simply say, "He didn't call." It says, "He's losing interest." Then, of course he's losing interest. Then, I knew this would happen. One silence becomes a courtroom. And somehow you're always the defendant. That's where need enters. Because now you're not only protecting a relationship, you're protecting yourself from what losing the relationship would seem to confirm. So you try harder, become easier, less demanding, more accommodating. Maybe you say, "I don't need anything serious right now." When you do, maybe you accept a relationship that exists almost entirely on his schedule. Maybe you've been seeing him for 8 months and still don't know what you are. But you're afraid to ask because asking might force an answer you don't want. So ambiguity becomes preferable to truth. At least ambiguity still contains hope. And hope can become addictive. Especially if you've learned to associate love with earning. Maybe growing up, affection came when you behaved, when you achieved, when you were useful, when you didn't create problems. You became the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who made life easier for everybody. Then decades later, you meet a man and unconsciously bring the same strategy into romance. You think, if I'm loving enough, patient enough, understanding enough, sexy enough, low maintenance enough, he will finally give me the love I want. Do you hear the old agreement underneath it? Love comes after performance. That's exhausting. And it makes relationships dangerous because it teaches you to treat rejection as evidence that you did not perform well enough, instead of considering something much simpler. Maybe he's emotionally unavailable. Maybe he doesn't want the same relationship you want. Maybe your values don't fit. Maybe he is attracted to you and still incapable of offering consistency. Maybe he likes you and isn't right for you. Those possibilities are much easier to see when your worth isn't on trial. This is one of the greatest emotional freedoms you can develop. Someone can fail to choose you without that meaning there was something wrong with you. Read that again emotionally, not intellectually. Because most women already understand it intellectually. You would tell your friend, his inability to commit doesn't define you. But when it happens to you, suddenly the philosophy disappears. You stare at the phone wondering what you did wrong. That's where the real work lives. And one of the first practices is almost embarrassingly simple. When you feel yourself asking, why doesn't he want me enough? Change the question. Ask, what is he actually offering? That's a completely different position. Why doesn't he want me enough? Places you beneath him, waiting to be evaluated. What is he actually offering puts both adults back in the room. Maybe he is offering something wonderful: consistency, affection, respect, curiosity, effort, emotional availability. Then receive it. But maybe what he's offering is chemistry without clarity, attention without consistency, promises without movement, physical closeness without emotional responsibility, a future that only exists in conversations at midnight. Then the question is no longer, how do I become enough for him? It's, is this enough for me? That is the beginning of individuation in love. You stop seeing yourself exclusively through another person's eyes. You recover the ability to evaluate reality from your own center. And I want to say something here as a man, because I think many women need to hear it from a male voice without games attached. A man can be attracted to you, enjoy you, miss you, think about you, feel emotionally connected to you, and still not be prepared to build the relationship you want. Those things are not identical. And when you desperately need the relationship to work, you'll often use his feelings as evidence that his behavior will eventually catch up. He loves me. Maybe. But can he build with you? He misses me. Maybe. But can he communicate consistently? He says I'm different. Beautiful. Can he make room for you in his actual life? The mature woman learns to stop translating emotion into capacity. She lets behavior speak its own language. And that becomes easier when she knows, if this man cannot meet me, I will be disappointed. I may grieve, but I will not lose myself. That sentence changes the entire relationship, because now love is allowed to be love, not an emergency, not proof, not rescue. And once you stop needing another person's choice to validate your worth, you begin seeing something else much more clearly. The urgency. That feeling that says, I need an answer now. I need reassurance now. I need him to respond now. And urgency can quietly turn love into a chase before you even realize you're running. And this is where emotional need becomes visible in behavior. You may never say, I am desperate for love. Nobody says that. Desperation usually wears better clothes. It looks like checking whether he's online, reading the same message 3 times because his punctuation seemed different, opening Instagram even though you promised yourself you wouldn't, wondering why he watched your story but didn't text, sending a message you don't really need to send because the silence has become physically uncomfortable, rewriting your response so you don't sound too interested, then deleting it because maybe you sounded too distant. You call this thinking, but often the body is doing something much simpler, trying to remove uncertainty, Because uncertainty feels dangerous when love has become connected to safety. If he responds warmly, your nervous system relaxes. If he doesn't, the alarm starts again. That's the cycle. And it can happen at 50 just as easily as 25. Maturity doesn't automatically erase attachment patterns. You can have a mortgage, adult children, a career, a retirement account. Be the person everybody calls for advice, and still become emotionally 14 years old when the right person triggers the wrong wound. That's not stupidity. That's how old emotional learning works. The question is what you do once you notice it. Because urgency lies. Urgency tells you, if I don't do something right now, I will lose him. But often the action you're about to take is not going to create closeness. It's going to create temporary relief. There's a difference. Sending the message may lower your anxiety. It may not improve the relationship. Checking his profile may answer one question. It creates 12 more. Demanding reassurance may calm you tonight. If nothing underneath the relationship changes, you'll need reassurance again tomorrow. So before acting, learn to ask, am I doing this to improve the relationship or to stop feeling anxious for 10 minutes? That question can save you from a lot of self-abandonment. Suppose he hasn't responded. You feel the urge to send another message. Pause. What do you actually know? He hasn't responded. That's all. Your mind has created, he's pulling away. He met someone else. I said something wrong. He's losing interest. Maybe one of those things is true, but at this moment you don't know. So don't punish yourself with a conclusion before reality arrives. Let time provide information. This is one of the hardest things for anxious people. Time. Because the anxious mind wants to solve uncertainty faster than life can reveal the answer. But some answers require observation. Does he return? Does he communicate? Does this pattern happen repeatedly? Does he explain? Does his behavior remain consistent over weeks and months? You cannot learn those things in 15 minutes of panic. You need space. This is where emotional independence begins. Not, I don't care, but I can tolerate not knowing yet. That's powerful. Try saying, I do not need tomorrow's answer tonight. Especially if you're lying awake constructing the future at 1:30 in the morning. You don't. Tomorrow can answer for itself. And there's another kind of urgency many women experience after a relationship ends. The need to replace it. You've spent 22 years with someone. Then suddenly you're alone. The house sounds different. Weekends feel enormous. Maybe the children have their own lives. Everyone says, enjoy your freedom. And you want to scream, because freedom wasn't what you wanted. You wanted your life to make sense again, so someone appears. He gives attention. You're not even sure you truly like him, but you like how you feel when the phone lights up. You like having plans. You like being wanted. You like not thinking about the other man. And very quickly the new relationship begins carrying the weight of the old emptiness. That's dangerous, not because you shouldn't date after heartbreak, but because there is a difference between meeting someone new and using someone new as anesthesia. Anesthesia works for a while. Then it wears off, and the wound is still there. Sometimes worse because now you've built another attachment around it. This is why periods of aloneness can be psychologically valuable, not because solitude is morally superior, and not because you need to become fully healed before you're allowed to love. Nobody is fully healed, but you need enough contact with yourself to recognize, I am not choosing this person simply because I am terrified of empty space. Can you spend a Friday night alone without turning it into evidence that your life has failed? Can you wake up Sunday morning and create a day? Can you go to dinner with a friend and enjoy it without constantly checking whether someone romantic has contacted you? Can you experience loneliness without immediately trying to eliminate it? Loneliness is uncomfortable, but it is survivable. And sometimes loneliness contains information. Maybe it tells you, I need more community. I miss being touched. I need purpose outside romantic love. I've let too many friendships disappear. I haven't built a relationship with myself. Those answers are useful. They create a life. But if every lonely feeling immediately sends you toward a relationship, you never discover what the loneliness was trying to teach. This is why stopping need is not about becoming less human. It's about becoming less automatic. You feel, then choose. Instead of feel to panic, to act. Feel, pause, observe, choose. That's maturity. And after enough pauses, something beautiful happens. Your nervous system learns, I can experience desire without becoming controlled by it. You can want him to text and wait. You can miss him and still have dinner. You can feel lonely and still remain selective. You can feel attracted and still notice red flags. That's where your standards become real. Standards are easy when nobody is testing them. The real standard appears when you're lonely and the wrong person offers attention. That's when you find out whether you believe what you've been saying. And once urgency stops choosing for you, another pattern begins to reveal itself. Because sometimes the problem isn't that you keep meeting the wrong people. It's that a certain kind of wrong person feels strangely familiar. And familiar can feel like love long before you realize it's a repetition. And this may be the most confronting part of the entire conversation, because sometimes you don't consciously choose the relationship that hurts you. You simply feel more drawn to it. He is inconsistent. You're fascinated. He's difficult to read. You think about him constantly. He gives you intense attention, then disappears. The emotional high when he returns feels enormous. You call it passion. Meanwhile, another man communicates clearly, shows up. You know where you stand. And strangely, you feel less. You tell yourself, there's no spark. Sometimes that's true. Not every stable person is your person. But sometimes what is missing isn't chemistry. It's anxiety. And your body has spent so many years experiencing anxiety inside love that calm doesn't immediately register as attraction. This is something I want women over 40 to be especially careful with, because by this stage of life, you have a long emotional history. Your nervous system has preferences. Not all of those preferences are wise. Maybe you spent 18 years with a man whose affection was unpredictable. Some days warm, other days unreachable. You learned to work for closeness. Then the relationship ends. A new man appears who is emotionally consistent. He calls when he says he will, asks about your life, doesn't disappear for 4 days. You're interested, but some part of you is waiting for the explosion. There isn't one. And because there isn't one, something almost feels flat. This is where people accidentally return to familiar pain. Not because they enjoy suffering, because familiar pain has a recognizable rhythm. The psyche often prefers a known problem to an unknown peace. That's where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes useful. The shadow isn't simply bad parts hidden inside you. It includes parts of yourself, needs, fears, and impulses you've learned not to consciously recognize. In relationships, those unconscious patterns can influence what you project onto another person. Maybe you don't consciously believe, I must earn love, but you feel most attracted to people whose love requires earning. Maybe you don't consciously believe, I will be abandoned, but you repeatedly stay with people whose behavior keeps abandonment anxiety alive. Maybe you say, "I want a man who is emotionally available." Then every emotionally available man somehow gets categorized as too nice, while the one who cannot give you clarity occupies your thoughts for 6 months. Don't judge yourself. Get curious. Ask, what does this attraction require me to feel? Peace or uncertainty? Do I want him, or do I want relief from not knowing whether he wants me? Those can feel very similar. There is also something else happening in repeated relationships. Your mind wants completion. Unfinished emotional stories have a strange pull. Maybe your father was emotionally distant. You spent childhood trying to win his attention. You grow up, meet a distant man, and something inside you thinks, "This time I'll get the ending right." Not consciously. You don't look at him across dinner and think, "Wonderful, he reminds me of unresolved childhood attachment." Of course not. You just feel pulled. And now the adult relationship becomes the stage where an older part of you is trying to resolve something. If I can make this distant man love me fully, maybe it proves I was always lovable. That's why letting go can feel so much bigger than losing one person. You're also losing the fantasy of finally correcting the old wound through him. No wonder you hold on. This is where shadow work becomes practical, not mystical. Ask, what am I trying to win here? If you finally got him to choose you, what would it mean? That you're beautiful? Worth staying for? Better than the woman who hurt him? Not too old? Not replaceable? Lovable? Whatever answer appears is probably something you need to develop a more direct relationship with. Because if you require his behavior to deliver that answer, you give him enormous psychological power. And maybe he doesn't even know he has it. You can begin reclaiming that projection. Instead of, "If he chooses me, I am desirable." Try, "His choice tells me about his choice. My desirability is larger than one person's ability to recognize or reciprocate it." Instead of, "If he stays, I am safe." Try, "I create safety partly by refusing to remain where emotional instability is chronic." Do you feel the shift? You stop waiting for another person to heal the wound by behaving perfectly. You begin building a life where the wound has less authority. That might include therapy, friends, spiritual life, grieving old experiences, learning to say no, dating more slowly, noticing your body, allowing consistency enough time to become attractive. And one of the hardest practices, stop interpreting emotional intensity as evidence of compatibility. Intensity tells you intensity exists. That's all. A 3-hour conversation at midnight can feel extraordinary. Can he show up Wednesday afternoon? A passionate reunion can feel like destiny. Can he repair the problem that caused the breakup? Amazing physical chemistry can create enormous attachment. Can the two of you communicate? Can you disagree safely? Does he have character? Does he keep his word? Can he tolerate your independence? Can you tolerate his? These are less cinematic questions. They build better relationships. This is how attraction matures. You don't stop feeling. You add discernment to feeling. And once you stop chasing familiar pain simply because it creates a familiar emotional high, something has to replace it. You need an identity strong enough that love is no longer the central organizing principle of your entire life. That is where Jung's idea of individuation becomes much more than a psychological concept. It becomes the difference between sharing your life and disappearing into somebody else's. And this is the part that changes everything without looking dramatic from the outside. You start becoming interested in your own life again. That's it. No performance, no dramatic speech, no Instagram post about choosing yourself. You simply begin returning. Maybe you've spent years being somebody's wife. Then the marriage ends. And one morning you're making coffee and realize, I don't actually know what I like anymore. Not what the two of you liked? You. What music? What kind of weekend? Where would you travel if nobody else's preferences mattered? What does your body enjoy? What do you want to learn? Who do you want around you? Those questions sound almost childish when you've spent decades being practical. They're not. They're identity questions. And Jung's individuation is deeply concerned with precisely this movement, becoming less identified with the roles you've had to play and more conscious of the person underneath them. Wife, mother, daughter, professional, caretaker. Those roles matter, but none of them are the entirety of you. And sometimes relationships become suffocating because one person has no psychological territory outside the relationship. Everything happens inside us. Every weekend, every friend, every plan, every emotional need, every identity. Then if us becomes unstable, there is nowhere for me to stand. This is why building an independent life isn't a rejection of partnership. It can protect partnership. You have places to bring energy from. You have conversations your partner isn't responsible for providing. Interests that do not require his enthusiasm. Relationships that aren't romantic. A sense of competence, purpose, privacy, spirituality. A body you inhabit for yourself. This creates psychological oxygen. And I want to say this carefully because be independent gets turned into bad relationship advice very easily. You're allowed to depend on your partner. Healthy love includes interdependence. There will be seasons where you lean heavily on one another. Illness, grief, career changes, family problems. Real relationships involve need. The goal is not, I need nothing from you. The goal is, my entire sense of self does not disappear when you are unavailable. That's different. And when you live from that place, dating changes. You meet someone attractive. Before, your mind instantly built the future. Now you remain curious. Let's see. He says something charming. You enjoy it. You don't immediately turn charm into character. You like him. You don't reorganize your entire calendar. You continue seeing your friends, going to the gym, calling your daughter, working, living. The relationship grows alongside your life instead of swallowing it. And if he begins showing inconsistency, you notice sooner. Because you're not staring so intensely at the possibility of love that everything else disappears. This is one of the biggest advantages of becoming more whole. You see better. Need narrows vision. Choice expands it. You begin noticing, how do I feel after spending time with him? Not only during, that's important. During the date, chemistry can be intoxicating. What happens after? Do you feel calm, respected, clear, or confused? Do you find yourself replaying everything you said because you're not sure where you stand? Do you become more yourself around him? Or begin editing yourself immediately? Does your life expand? Or do you slowly abandon it? Those answers matter. A mature relationship should not require you to become less recognizable to yourself. This doesn't mean you never change for love. Of course you change. Good relationships stretch us, ask us to compromise, become more patient, more accountable, less selfish. But growth is not disappearance. Compromise is not erasure. You should still recognize the woman looking back at you. And this becomes especially important if you have already spent 20 years disappearing once. You've earned the right to stop repeating yourself. Maybe your first marriage taught you to keep quiet. The next relationship should not require silence again. Maybe you spent decades being emotionally responsible for a man who never became responsible for himself. You don't need another project. Maybe you were with someone who made you feel guilty for wanting affection. You do not have to prove your maturity by accepting emotional starvation again. Your history is allowed to teach you. That's what consciousness is for. And one of the most beautiful results of this work is that your attraction criteria can begin changing. You notice kindness, not weakness; consistency, not boredom; emotional literacy, not too sensitive; responsibility, not lack of excitement. A man who asks, "How are you?" and actually listens. A man who does not require you to become a detective. A man whose affection is not a reward for good behavior. A man who can disagree without withdrawing love. A man who is interested in the life you've built instead of needing to become its center. This kind of love may not create the same adrenaline. Good. Adrenaline is useful when a tiger is chasing you. It does not need to be the foundation of your romantic life. Healthy attraction can still be passionate, sexy, playful, deep. But underneath all of that is something anxiety rarely gives you: room to breathe. You don't wake up wondering whether today is the day he becomes cold. You don't constantly audition. You don't live in the exhausting cycle of losing and recovering connection. You're able to actually enjoy him. That's the irony. When you need less reassurance, you can often receive love more deeply, because you're no longer spending half the relationship measuring whether it will disappear. You're inside it, present. And that prepares you for the final shift. Because at some point, the question stops being, "What kind of person can I attract?" and becomes, "What kind of love am I now capable of recognizing, receiving, and sustaining?" That's much more important. And the love that becomes possible from this place often feels different from what you expected. Quieter, clearer, less theatrical, not empty, not passionless, just less confusing. He likes you, and you know. You like him, and you're allowed to show it. There's no strange competition over who cares less. No 72-hour waiting period before answering a text because somebody online said availability destroys attraction. No pretending not to need closeness. No disappearing acts designed to provoke pursuit. Two adults. Interested. Present. Choosing. That sounds simple. For someone accustomed to unstable love, simple can feel revolutionary. There is also less rescuing. He isn't there to repair your entire past, and you're not there to repair his. You can have compassion for his wounds without becoming his therapist. He can understand yours without being responsible for erasing them. You help one another, but each person remains responsible for their own growth. That's what makes love between more individuated adults feel so different. There is room for both people to exist. You can say, "I need reassurance today," without turning reassurance into a daily test. He can say, "I need time alone," without you automatically hearing, "I don't love you." You can disagree, and nobody assumes the relationship is ending. You can have separate interests, and nobody interprets independence as rejection. You can miss each other without manufacturing absence. You can need each other sometimes without making need the entire foundation. This is why I don't actually want you to stop needing love. The title sounds provocative, but that isn't the deeper truth. Human beings need love. Connection matters. Attachment matters. Being cared for matters. The transformation is that you stop needing romantic love to answer questions it was never designed to answer. Am I worthy? A relationship cannot permanently answer that for you. Am I enough? No human being's daily mood should decide that. Will I be okay? Another person cannot promise you a life without loss. Am I complete? Nobody can complete a self you refuse to inhabit. When those jobs return to you, love becomes lighter, not shallow. Lighter because it no longer has to carry your entire identity. And from there, the relationship can become something much more beautiful. A place where two lives overlap, not one life swallowing the other. You bring your world, he brings his. Then together you build a third thing, us. But us doesn't kill me and you. That's mature intimacy. And there is something else that often changes after 40. You become less interested in potential. You've lived enough life. You know time matters, not in a panicked way, in a clear way. You don't want to spend 5 more years trying to convince a grown man that emotional consistency is important. You don't want another relationship where you're constantly waiting for the person you're already with to arrive. You begin wanting reality. If he's kind, you notice. If he's emotionally mature, you value it. If he's inconsistent, you don't spend 2 years turning inconsistency into a psychological mystery. If he tells you he does not want commitment, you believe the sentence. If his actions repeatedly contradict his promises, you stop dating the promise. This is what need used to make difficult. Need said, maybe. Wholeness says, show me. Not aggressively, calmly. Show me who you are. I'll watch. And while I'm watching, I will continue living. That sentence contains so much freedom. You don't put your life on hold while a man decides whether he can love you. You don't hand him the keys to your future after 3 beautiful conversations. You let intimacy earn depth. That's important. Healthy love doesn't need to be rushed to feel real. It can develop, reveal, deepen. And because you're not trying to use the relationship to fill every empty place inside you, you have the patience to see what's actually there. This also changes what happens when something doesn't work. Before, rejection could feel catastrophic. Now it still hurts. Of course, maybe you really liked him. Maybe you saw a possibility. Maybe you allowed yourself to hope. Let it hurt. But you don't immediately convert disappointment into self-contempt. You don't say, here we go again, nobody stays. You say, this one didn't become what I hoped. That's sad. It isn't an identity. You grieve the specific person, not your entire worth. That's enormous progress. And when someone healthy does arrive, you may need to learn something that nobody talks about enough. You may need to learn to tolerate healthy love. Because if chaos was familiar, peace can make you suspicious. He calls consistently. You think, what's the catch? He communicates directly. You wonder whether he's boring. He doesn't play games. Part of you almost misses the chase. This is where growth becomes active. Don't only ask, am I attracted? Ask, what kind of attraction am I accustomed to? Give healthy connection enough time to develop its own depth, not indefinitely. There must be real interest. But don't automatically reject peace simply because peace doesn't trigger the same nervous system fireworks as uncertainty. A stable love can become intensely passionate once your body realizes it doesn't have to defend itself all the time. Imagine what intimacy feels like when half your energy isn't being used to monitor danger. Imagine loving a man without constantly wondering whether he is leaving. Imagine receiving affection without immediately calculating how long it will last. Imagine having a difficult conversation without assuming one disagreement destroyed everything. That's a different kind of romance. And if you've spent decades fighting for love, you may discover that being loved peacefully is one of the most unfamiliar things you've ever experienced. Let yourself learn it. Conclusion. So what is the love you attract when you stop needing it? I would phrase it more carefully. It's the love you become more capable of recognizing, choosing, and sustaining when you stop needing another person to complete you. Because life does not operate like a vending machine. You cannot heal yourself and guarantee that the next man will be wonderful. Good women still meet emotionally unavailable men. Healthy people still experience rejection. People who love themselves still get hurt. This isn't magic. It's discernment. When your sense of worth is more stable, the emotionally unavailable man may still appear. You simply stay impressed for less time. The inconsistent man may still be attractive. You stop building a future around his potential. The man who offers crumbs may still knock on the door. You no longer call crumbs a feast because you've been starving. That's what changes. And maybe you're listening to this after years of loving from hunger. If so, don't shame the woman you were. She was trying to survive. Maybe she thought, if I love harder, he'll stay. If I'm patient enough, he'll change. If I become easier to love, I'll finally be loved properly. She wasn't stupid. She was trying to solve pain with the tools she had. But now you know more. You know that wanting love is human. Needing another person's behavior to continuously regulate your worth is different. You know that urgency is not always intuition. Sometimes it's an old wound asking for immediate relief. You know that attachment can keep you loyal to something simply because it feels familiar. You know that chemistry is real. But chemistry alone doesn't tell you whether a relationship is safe. And you know something Jung understood deeply. The parts of ourselves we refuse to face do not simply disappear. They begin influencing our choices from the background. That's why becoming conscious matters. Maybe your shadow contains fear of abandonment. Then look at it. Maybe it contains anger you've never allowed yourself to feel because you were always the nice one. Listen, maybe it contains independence you suppressed to keep somebody else comfortable. Recover it. Maybe there is a woman inside you who no longer wants to spend the second half of her life begging for what she already knows love should contain. Let her speak. Because individuation doesn't make you less capable of love. It can make you capable of better love. Love without constant self-betrayal. Love where you can be generous without disappearing. Love where you can need comfort without becoming helpless. Love where two adults are allowed to have separate inner worlds. Love where you don't have to earn basic respect every morning. Love where attraction and peace are allowed to exist in the same room. And there is something I want to tell you as a man. You do not become more lovable when you become easier to neglect. You do not become more valuable because you can tolerate more pain. You do not become a better woman because you learned how to ask for less than you actually need. The right relationship will still require compromise, patience, grace, work. But it should not require you to repeatedly become less of yourself so that somebody else can remain comfortable. You've done enough disappearing. Maybe for children, family, a marriage, work, people who needed you. Maybe you've spent 30 years being useful. Now I want you to become present in your own life. Because when you stop needing a relationship to save you, you become much more capable of asking, do I actually like who I am here? That's the question. Not, does he want me? Do I like who I become around him? Do I feel free to speak? Do I laugh? Do I feel respected? Do I trust his character? Does my nervous system get to rest? Can I have a bad day without fearing I'll become too much? Can he have a bad day without making me responsible for fixing him? Can we repair? Can we apologize? Can we grow? Do I feel more alive? Those questions create a different love life, and maybe the person you're with right now can meet you there. Wonderful. Maybe this transformation improves an existing relationship because you stop asking it to carry responsibilities that belong to you, and start expecting mutual responsibilities that belong to both of you. Or maybe you realize you're with someone who only seemed compatible while you were willing to abandon yourself. That realization hurts, but it is not failure. Sometimes becoming healthier doesn't save the relationship. It saves you from remaining inside the wrong one. And if you're single, please don't turn this into another assignment. I must become perfectly whole before love arrives. No. You are allowed to want partnership now. You are allowed to date while you're still growing. You are allowed to feel lonely. You're allowed to wish somebody were beside you. Wholeness does not mean you never ache. It means the ache no longer decides who gets access to you. That's a huge difference. The lonely Friday night can say, "I wish I had someone." And your self-respect can answer, "I know. But we are not calling the man who only wants us when he's lonely too." That's growth. You can miss your ex and not return. You can want companionship and remain selective. You can desire intimacy and refuse confusion. You can be hopeful about love without turning hope into desperation. And eventually, perhaps somebody enters your life who doesn't feel like a rescue. He simply feels like a man you genuinely enjoy being beside. You don't need him to prove anything. You don't need him to heal every old wound. You don't need him to become the center of your existence. You look at him and think, "My life already belongs to me, and I would love to share part of it with you." And he looks at you from his own life and says, "I'd like that too." That may sound less dramatic than, "I can't live without you." Good. Because people who cannot live without each other are terrified. People who can live and still choose each other have something much more interesting. Freedom. And freedom makes love meaningful, because every day he stays, there is choice. Every day you stay, there is choice. Not fear, not dependency, not, "I have nowhere else to go." Choice. So if you've spent your whole life asking, "When will somebody finally love me the way I need?" Maybe today's question is different. What happens when I stop needing love to tell me who I am? That's where everything starts. Because when romantic love no longer determines your value, you don't lose love. You become available for a version of it that doesn't require your disappearance. And perhaps that is the love you've been looking for all along. Not someone who completes you, someone who meets you, not someone who rescues you, someone who walks beside you, not someone you cannot live without, someone whose presence makes the life you already have even richer. And when that kind of love arrives, you don't have to grip it. You don't have to beg. You don't have to perform. You don't have to become smaller. You can simply open the door and say, "I am already here. Come meet me as I am." If this message spoke to something you've been carrying quietly, take a second to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And before you leave, choose one of the videos on your screen now. There may be something there that helps you understand what you're going through from a completely different angle. I'll see you there.